Christopher Schlegel and InstructorGuitarTricks.com. This tutorial is aimed at helping the beginner guitar student understand the answer to the question, what does the right hand do? Essentially, it has two functions. It strikes the strings by either picking it with pick, strumming, picking individual notes, or setting the pick down, use your fingers, right? Or picking individual notes with your fingers. You can also do hybrid picking, which is combining the pick with your fingers, which is a little bit more advanced, but you can do it. The right hand also has a secondary function of muting, so that you dampen the strings from ringing, so that even if you inadvertently hit one, it won't ring out. Let's have a close-up look at those techniques. The primary job of your right hand is to strike the strings. In this case, we're going to start by talking about how to do that with a pick. You want to use a pick, or a plectrum, essentially as an extension of your index finger. You want to hold it in between your thumb and your index finger, and basically, see how it has that little point? You basically want to use that as an extension of your index finger pointing out. You can experiment with different angles, and different guitar players have different techniques that you try that, but before you experiment with that, why don't we just start by doing that. Basically make it an extension of your index finger. You don't want to hold it too close. You don't want to choke up too much, because then there's no pick to actually hit the strings. You don't want to have too much of it exposed, because then it might flop around and fall right out of your finger. You want to cover just enough, choke up just enough, like maybe leave about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch sticking out, so that you've got something to hold, and so that you've got something sticking out to strike the strings. When you do strike the strings, you want to do it in a manner that's grazing across the string. You don't want to dig in too far, because number one, that might get that percussive sound, or even make the string sound a little bit too sharp. As well as, if you dig in too much, it's hard to get from one string to the next if you dig in. In order to avoid that, what you do is, don't cramp your hand up, hold the pick lightly, hold just enough pressure. If you hold it too hard, you're going to cramp your fingers and your hand and your arm. It's all too hard to dig in, and it's hard to play. You want to make it an efficient, effortless process. So, grip the pick lightly, not too hard, not too light, and graze across the string. Notice how I have the pick angled so that it will basically just go right across each string and over to the next one. When I come back up, notice I'll angle it this way to make it easy to glide and graze across in both directions. Now that's greatly exaggerated, but it still holds true when I speed up. You'll notice that I am still leaning the pick back and forth. This holds true even when I'm picking individual notes. I'll pick and then back up, and then down. Notice when I start going faster, that motion is not as exaggerated as lean it down this way and lean it back this way, but it's still there. You still want to slightly move the pick so that you are creating an effortless, efficient motion rather than fighting against the strings to get to the next note or to the next string. Now, all these principles hold true when you dispense with the pick entirely and just use your fingers. You want to angle your fingers or your thumb so you can graze effortlessly and efficiently across the strings. Same thing when you pick it. Notice I'm grazing with my thumb, or you can use your index or any of your other fingers to do that as well. There's also a very involved finger picking technique where you assign one string to each finger and or alternate the So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but it still winds up being the same thing. You just want to hit enough of the string to make it sound. Not too much, not too little. You want to make sure your hand, while holding a pick or not, is not tight so that your muscles are going to cramp up, but just loose enough so that you can accomplish the motions that you want to accomplish. Always trying to get an efficient, controlled, effortless motion happening. Now there's also a technique known as hybrid picking. That means that you are going to use the pick and your fingers. Essentially what happens is, a lot of times on the bass notes, you might pick, and then on the treble strings, you might pick with your fingers. So you get a... So for things that you want to separate the lower strings from the higher strings, or for things where you literally can't play the middle strings, where you're supposed to play something, you might have to use the pick down in the bass in order to accomplish certain things. That's a little bit advanced, but it is a specific thing that the right hand does. Now the right hand also has a very important secondary job, which is called muting. Essentially what it does is you hold your right hand on the strings to stop them from ringing. Now, a lot of times what you do is you use the side of your palm. Sometimes you might use one of your fingers. Sometimes you might use the base of your hand. But most of the time you're using the side of your palm, and you're going to be somewhere down here by the bridge saddles or on the strings up in this area. And the idea is generally that you're going to block certain strings from ringing while letting other ones ring. So, for example, there might be a chord in which I'll be playing these two bottom strings, but I don't want any of these other ones to ring. So what might happen is I'll put my fingers on the strings so I can hear that ringing, but I'll put my palm on the other string. So even if I hit them accidentally, they won't ring. So all I can hear are the strings that I want ringing. When you play individual notes, this happens a lot too. For example, if I notice that what I'm doing there is I'm resting my palm on the bottom strings so that I don't inadvertently hit other strings. I can mute them so I don't have to. And sometimes even if I'm not hitting them directly, even if I'm being very precise in my picking, it's still possible that a sympathetic vibration might start these strings ringing. And I don't want to hear any of that. I want to mute them so that I don't hear any of that ringing. So, a lot of times muting is accomplished by your left hand, but your right hand does have a very important task in being able to mute. So, that's what your right hand is supposed to do. It's supposed to strike the strings with a pick or with your fingers, and it's supposed to mute, which means to stop strings from ringing that you don't want to make any noise. Now, some of that stuff does get a little bit complicated. Some of it may seem overwhelming right now, but with enough practice, it can definitely become second nature and relatively easy to do and form the basis of guitar right-hand technique.